Evening all. It's going to be a bit of a waffle video. Excuse me while I knock the camera. I'm going to touch on a few things. One, I'm going to touch on this, which is the Jumper 2 Pro with internal elrs. And I'm going to touch on this. I was going to do a proper video, but I can't be bothered on how to set it up. And I'm just going to touch on this briefly, and then we'll discuss Kiss Ultra, Fetech, Betaflight, and some of the stuff that seems to be going on at the moment with UAV tech and bardwell. So just to cut to the chase, I bought this little guy, never used elrs before. This is the internal 1 watt elrs version, and I bought this for one specific reason, which is my son, who has just turned 11, for the first time has finally become interested in learning to fly, and that is largely down to this little guy, which is a Cinerace 20 with its purple LEDs. So rather than him using my Tango 2, which is the only radio he can comfortably hold, I got him this little guy because it was super cheap. And all the things that you've read about this guy are absolutely true. Obviously we've got this momentary switch. Personally speaking, it doesn't really bother me too much. I'll just use that as my arm switch and that as my mode switch, as I always would do, and use that as a buzzer. The bigger issue with this guy is the gimbals stick out far too proudly. So what I've done is basically just hacked off with a strong pair of wire cutters about 5mm of the metal stick, and I've just 3D printed these little stick ends, and now the gimbals feel just as nice and lovely as my Tango 2, because I like that as a thumber. I like those low profile gimbals. However, this guy, don't know if it's the same for all of them, has a bit of an issue. The gimbals out of the box are really loose, and I love that. These gimbals to me feel awesome. However, they have drift. So on this particular radio, particularly you can find it drifts around 20 points. Sometimes you'll do that and it'll be nicely centered at 1500. Other times it'll be around 1520, and that can cause a little bit of a problem. It's not a deal breaker per se, but it's not great. And the bigger issue is, although you can adjust the tension of these gimbals, because presumably they're really cheap and nasty, you can't actually make them tighter, you can only make them looser. So there isn't any way that you can take that slop out of them. Now, of course, this might be just a problem with this particular radio, but given the whole thing feels cheap and nasty, I'm guessing it's probably quite a large proportion of them. And while the Tango 2 also feels cheap and nasty, it actually survives the test of time. So verdict on this is it's really cheap. I'm not disappointed that I bought it, and in terms of a little cheap radio to suit my son or someone with small hands, it fits the bill perfectly. But if you want a really accurate set of gimbals, this isn't it. elrs I found pain-free and easy to flash the internal module. This version uses EdgeTX as opposed to OpenTX, and everything seems to work really well. And I'm really impressed with elrs, particularly the little ceramic antenna receivers, which are great for little quads like this. You can see I've got the EP2 on the back. I'm getting surprising range from them, so really impressed with that, but just be a little bit careful. Your FPV said, sorry, I just knocked the camera, said he'd send me the Zorro if he eventually gets them in, so I might do a video at some point. But the major point, or the major thing I wanted to raise in this video is Bardwell posted, well, a game of snakes where he spent 20 minutes showing you how to wire up a Kiss Ultra to a BL Heli ESC. And in the comments section of that video, we had UAV tech essentially trying to assassinate said Kiss Ultra. and there were a lot of inaccuracies mentioned. He subsequently then did a video about Fetec, Kiss Ultra and Kiss, which again was full of inaccuracies. And the whole thing smacks of sort of sour grapes. I don't really understand what he's trying to achieve by this. So I thought I'd do this little video really just to hopefully clarify some of the points and put across the point of somebody who flies beta flight. All these little quads are on beta flight. This guy is using the Fetec G4. This is Bardwell's frame, which flies fantastic, but these arms are exceptionally weak where they're joined, and there's no motor protection unless you pay extra for the differently cut arms, which you can't get in the UK. But this is flying the Fetec G4. This is flying he says this is flying Kiss V2, and this is a frame my friend Mark Stevens prototyped, and this guy is flying Kiss Ultra. So within my stable of lots of quads, I have pretty much every firmware, including Emu flights, and I even have a Flight 1 quad. So I've got most of the bases covered. Now, just to make this short and sweet, as he knocks his camera for the 50th time, Kiss was released donkeys ago. Kiss V2 was a successor to that, and Felix did a lot of the initial coding. However, that was ages ago. He then launched Fetec and the ESCs which went alongside it. However, since he launched Fetec and introduced one wire and obviously the new range of ESCs using sine wave, he hasn't really done a lot in the last 2 years. And Alexander Fedorov has been updating both Kiss code and Fetec Kiss code for a number of years, well before Fetec was released. So when people sort of say that there's this hobbyist who's suddenly come out with his own flight controller and firmware, if you're using Fetec or you're flying Kiss V2, so 70 to 80% of the code that you're flying with on a daily basis was written by Alexander Fedorov. And that goes to the filter settings, to GPS return home, to DJI, to MSP. The list goes on and on and on. If you look at the commits on GitHub, you will see his name is all over it. And Kiss Ultra largely came about because Fedorov got fed up of doing the lion's share of the work, while Fetec did very little other than try to bug fix D-shot issues on their own ESCs and ignore people who are having issues with fireballs and things like that. So Fedorov isn't a guy who's just crawled out of the woodwork and decided to, release some sort of new firmware. His firmware is running a large portion of it in every single quad that's running Kiss V2 or Fetec. This brings us to today, where we have Kiss Ultra. And Kiss Ultra was largely designed and completely rewritten to take away many of the issues which historically people had with Kiss, namely being tied to Kiss or Fetec ESCs, the lack of an onboard OSD and BL heli pass-through. So they were the number one things that he decided to tackle. And because he wanted to use or make an OSD which was built into the board. So it wasn't an OSD chip, but it was all done by the actual processor within the flight controller. So the two things happened simultaneously. What you saw on the OSD in the configurator was exactly what you would see on the OSD in the goggles. He had to rewrite a lot of the code to make it work on the new flight controller. So, a couple of things to discuss. In Bardwell's recent video where he showed two quads flying and he was trying to show you or ask you to guess which one was which, I don't really see much merit in that, because I think in the best of worlds you wouldn't be able to guess from a short bit of flight footage. The differences will be felt more in the sticks. Fetec with a Fetec ESC flies fantastically. However, the issue that people had with Fetec were the ESCs kept catching on fire. KISS flies amazing with KISS ESCs, but KISS don't have a 6S ESC. They have a 5S 4-in-1 ESC, which people like Mr. Steele use on 6S, but the danger of that is you'll end up smoking it. So what Alexander decided to do is release his own flight controller with BL Heli pass-through, which would take away the issues that people were having with Fetec ESCs catching on fire and the FETs melting, and would also mean that you weren't tied to using KISS ESCs, which weren't rated for the 6S that most people are commonly flying today. When it comes to flight performance, Alexander Fedorov has never said that KISS Ultra flies better than either Fetec or KISS V2. Many other people have, but he is not one of them. In Bardwell's testing, he is presumably testing a Fetec flight controller with a Fetec ESC against a KISS Ultra flight controller, which he said he was using the Mamba ESC, BL Heli 32 ESC that came with the particular frame he was flying. In my opinion, KISS Ultra, KISS and Fetec all fly best using either a Fetec or a KISS ESC. I don't use KISS ESCs because I found, or should I say, when I was coming into KISS, everybody who I knew was using them were having issues with exploding ESCs. Fetec ESCs I do use, and I haven't had too many issues. I say too many issues. I have lost a few for random issues. I lost one relatively recently, just updating the firmware, but there are millions of people out there, or hundreds of people out there, who've had issues that can't be explained from bad building. So there's definitely something to take into account there. So if you wanted to compare KISS Ultra to Fetec in terms of pure flight performance, you would basically need to use a KISS ESC or a Fetec ESC on both of them. Because while KISS flies, or KISS Ultra flies amazing on a BL Heli ESC, it does lose a bit of the special smoothness or the magic or whatever you wish to call it. It just feels slightly different. You still get the benefit of a great out of the box tune. You still get the benefit of a really simple way to tune and fly, but you don't get the ultimates. Having said that, because you don't have to buy a Fetec ESC and potentially throw your money away or spend silly money on a KISS ESC, for many people that will be a huge draw, because it means finally you can drop in a KISS flight controller, KISS Ultra flight controller, into your existing quad with a BL Heli 32 ESC and go flying with minimal fuss. So I hope that kind of clears things up. Alexander Fedorov has done the lion's share of the work for both Fetec, for KISS V2, and he's finally decided to do his own thing rather than other people getting all the glory and him quietly coding in the background. And he's done that in his own way, in small batches, giving good service, and he knows the majority of his customers personally via Patreon or via Messenger. Which leads me on to UAV tech. Now, The majority of us who are grown-ups will go to a flying field and we'll just fly, we'll have fun, we'll dick around, we'll crash into trees. I don't care whether you're flying beta flight or flight one or emu flight. Fly whatever you want to fly, whatever makes you happy, whatever fits in your budget. I don't care whether you've got a posh frame or a Banggood frame. I don't care about any of that. Just fly whatever makes you happy. However, some people that isn't enough, and it seems UAV Tech is one of them. Now, historically, this was a guy who created some nice presets for beta flight to help people out, but it seems that he's sort of spent too long in his own little world, and if you look at his comments, feels that nothing can be true unless he's personally vetted it. The guy, to put it blunt, is a tit. When he compares many things, there are two ways of looking at this. There are those who think black boxing is the nth degree and the absolute, and there are those who don't, and which camp you're in is largely irrelevant. Whatever makes you happy. But you'll hear him talking about set point tracking and things like that. And one of the comments kind of made me laugh was when he was waffling on about this, is Alexander Fedorov, the coder for KISS Ultra, saying perfect set point tracking doesn't make your quad fly better. All it means is that your set point tracking is good. And it's true to an extent. Of course, if your set point tracking is awful, your quad won't do what you want it to do. But between those two, perfect tracking and awful tracking, there's a huge range of stuff. And this is where you will find the differences between those like UAV Tech and other pilots who prefer to fly by feel, that dirty word. If you look at anything in the world that requires tuning, if you look at Formula One, even within the same car, the teammates will have different setups that they prefer. And Formula One is a sport where millions of pounds are invested. They're not looking at, a 50p black box logger shoved on the bottom of their quad. They're looking at true data with, the best books and the best minds in the business behind it. And even they can't design one car set up the same way for two different drivers and get the same result. And the reason for that is we're all different. And that applies not just to Formula One, but if you're into musical instruments and you tune guitars, whatever you want to do in life, there will be a variation between what I like and what you like. KISS Ultra has some new bells and whistles on it compared to FETEC or KISS V2. It has D-stop, which was added by Alexander Fedorov to give a sharper end to basically hard stops. And that feature was added for people who like sort of the S-bang style, that jip, 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 jip flight style. And KISS naturally is softer. So he added that in to please that proportion of the audience. Personally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of that feature. I find it a little bit harsh and a little bit sharp for my liking. There's someone who prefers softer, more flowing freestyle. So I don't use that. But that feature is there for people who do. When you have somebody like UAV Tech who thinks that A plus B must at all points equal C, you have a problem, because it just isn't true in any walk of life. And you can't explain this to people if they're fundamentally of this mindset. And I don't know what UAV Tech's problem is. He started out with a guy who just liked to black box and twiddle with things. I know he sort of added some presets and possibly was even involved in some of the beta flight development. But fundamentally, this guy has a bit of a sort of problem that he can't go beyond the data itself. And the data itself is flawed. It will always be flawed, because what the data says I should like and what I actually like are two different things. Betaflight 4.3 is great. I love the wizard where you can change the motor order and all the rest of it in that. It seems to fly hugely better than many big beta flights have in the past. Do I fly beta flight on my freestyle quads, my main quads? No, I don't, because for me, it lacks the finesse and feel and the slight looseness that I look for and I like when I'm flying. If that isn't something that you like, and the tweaks that Alexander Fedorov has made don't answer what you're looking for, then send him an email and tell him what you want so he can look into it, or fly beta flight or flight 1 or emu flight or whatever the hell you want to fly. All of those are absolutely fine. What isn't fine is making a badly researched, in fact zero research, when you have no idea about the product, you've never used the product, and you haven't even taken the time to speak to the person who developed it. All I can say is, Mark from UAV Tech, you're an absolute twat. You shot yourself in the foot. You've lost all respect from people like myself and other people who've been flying for years and years and years. And just because you use a black box logger, it amounts to nothing. My message to you would be to spend less time at your computer and more time on the sticks. Because if you do that, you'll maybe understand that sitting in the back room getting dusty is not the best way to find out what is working and what isn't working. And if Betaflight had more of that mentality, it wouldn't be as confusing for newcomers as it is. When we're speaking about Betaflight, I'd like to make a shout out to lovely people like Chris Thompson and people like that who actively engage with the community in a positive way, who don't take things personally, who just want to create this firmware that's great for everybody. And all of those things should be celebrated and enjoyed by the community. When we've got people who are trying to force us into one camp or the other for no reason other than to create clicks and likes and to promote their own agenda, for me that isn't acceptable, which is why I've made this video. If I wanted to, even though I've given up reviewing and things like that, I could snap my fingers and get pretty much every flight controller for free on the market, the same with ESCs. I moved away from that because I felt that KISS offered me something that I hadn't found with other flight controllers and other firmwares. And KISS Ultra basically just takes away a lot of the faff that certainly analog pilots were having. The FETEC G4 flies fantastic. KISS Ultra flies fantastic. It has a few more knobs. It has a better OSD, and frankly, it has a nicer, more open, more inclusive community than FETEC ever did, because FETEC until very recently was a closed door. In the future, FETEC is going one way. They will have their own firmware, and Alexander Fedorov will carry on working with KISS Ultra, but he's also said that he will add and keep KISS V2 up to date, because frankly, Felix was taking the paycheck from Flyduino and doing very little work for it, which is why a lot of people were getting fed up. So, hope this has been useful for somebody. As I said, I might do a review against this versus the Zorro, because I don't feel like a lot of the actual user things have been touched on. But if you want to fly, go and have fun, whether you're flying the FETEC G4 or Betaflight or KISS Ultra, but let's not have any of this pretend science which is flawed and very one-sided. Cheers guys, thanks, bye bye.